Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, all depending on the time zone you're joining us from. So Delhi Power BI user group and Power BI Philippines community welcome you to this another event of our monthly sessions around Power Platform. And today I'm glad to introduce Mathias, who is a software developer and an architect with Microsoft Technologies. He is known for his eminent contributions in the field of Power BI in forms of DevOps. He has brought really immense knowledge from his past learnings and put up a tool set that is now, it is open source and contributing richly towards how we do DevOps with Power BI. It's maturing by the day, and we have today himself with us so that he can explain us about this software. So welcome here, Mathias, and the stage is yours.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. You can hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for inviting me. It's a great pleasure, a great honor. I really appreciate it. I'm actually in India at the moment, visiting my team, which is based in Mumbai. I've got a really amazing team of 7 here, and I've taken an opportunity after lockdown, where travel wasn't possible, to finally come over here again. Anyone in the area who's interested to working with us, by all means, do reach out. We're always very keen on new people to join the company. So let me start a screen share and introduce myself very briefly and introduce the topic of today. Share screen. Need to get that one right. Here we go. Hopefully you can see a PowerPoint slide now. There are a few notes in here. I'm gonna share that later as well. Let me just figure out how to move to the next slide. Here we go. So just a few facts about myself. I'm working for YouGov, which is based in London. I'm the head of finance systems there, basically looking at all things data and analytics, as well as data governance within the YouGov finance team. Power BI is a very big part of that. And I've been in the Power BI space for over 6 years now. And I'm extremely passionate about Power BI, so much so that I started working on what now is an open source project, Pbi Tools, which goes all the way back to 2016, actually, but went open source only October last year. And we're going to see and hear quite a bit about that today. If you want to follow me, Twitter is currently where I'm most active. So Twitter is definitely a good place to go, but also LinkedIn. And let me just move on to agenda. So as I said, Pbi Tools is going to feature today. What we want to look at specifically is how Pbi Tools helps when it comes to developing reports for Power BI. Also, I'm going to give a lot of tips and tricks and learnings from from the past years, where we've been using the workflows and the techniques I'm talking about in my team. When I say report, I mean report in a strict sense, or people usually also refer to thin reports. So we're basically only focusing on the visual aspect of Power BI. We're not looking into modeling or data sets or Power Query or any of that. That's also an area where Power BI can help, but just in terms of focus, we're only looking at visuals today. It's going to be very demo heavy. So I'm gonna look at setting up a repository with reports in it. We're briefly talking about branching. We're then gonna look at the output of PBI tools. So basically, what do we get in our repository? Looking at committing and tracking changes. And I'm going to give a bunch of best practices as well. Again, so this is a good place to move to the next slide. So very briefly, in terms of what is PBI Tools and what does it solve? As I said, I've been in the Power BI space for several years now. Originally, I was working all on my own, which is in a way what Power BI is designed for. So that is all very straightforward. But at some point, I moved to actually setting up a team and figuring out how to scale what I've been doing on my own originally. And this is generally where Power BI has some limitations. If you want to collaborate, if you want to scale, if you want to work together on projects, that's not what we're getting a lot of support from Power BI Desktop, for instance. And so that's how PBI Tools was born. Basically, PBI Tools allows to work on Power BI projects in such a way that we can take full advantage of source control. We can use established Git workflows. We can also automate things like deployments, for instance. There's a huge ask for those kinds of features to go into Power BI natively. I know lots of people in the community are very passionate about that. I know Microsoft is listening, and there are definitely things happening, but this is where we are today. In a way, PBI Tools is the only viable option today in order to get those kinds of workflows in place. So I've got this chart, this diagram here. Let's take this apart a little bit. So over here, develop. What PBI Tools does is to basically take what lives inside a PBIX file, which is generally just a black box, and allows us to look inside, allows us to understand how various changes we're making actually impacts our project. In order to do that, PBI Tools provides a command called extract, and that one effectively, well, it does what it says. It extracts all the sources from within a PBIX file in such a way that they are readable and that you can make sense of them, allowing you to figure out what's going on inside. Once we've run extract, this is where we move to the second pillar here. We no longer work with a single file. Instead, we work with a folder structure that has various files, which actually allow us to understand changes. And the next thing, if we move over to the right side, is the reverse of extract, which is compile. So the expanded folder structure is not something Power BI understands natively. That's something only PBI Tools understands. If we want to go back into Power BI, we need to recompile that folder structure to make it yet again a PBIX file, which we can then upload to Power BI service, for instance. That's pretty much the gist of it. So let me switch over to demos and let me show you what I've just explained in theory in practice. There we go. So first of all, again, I talked about not looking into modeling today. So I'm just using an existing data set that sits in my Pbi Tools Power BI tenant. It is a file I've been using. If you've seen other of my talks, you'll be familiar with that because I'm always using the exact same one. It's basically a Contoso data set which is available as a free download from SQLBI.com, and that's what we'll be using as our example today. So I've got a very basic and simple report open in Power BI Desktop right now. That is also part of the PBIX file, which you can download here. And that's the one we want to be working with. So let's switch over to this view. I've already set up an empty repository. So this is a Git repository. If you're entirely new to Git, I've recently done a Git introductory session, which was hosted live on the 13th of April, and the recording of that is available on YouTube. Would definitely recommend that. I'll share the link to that later on. So I've got I've got my folder here, which currently contains a README file and my PBIX file. If I click that, the edit, I can't display it because I don't understand this format, right? That's basically the problem we're trying to address here. We want to be able to see what's inside there. We want to be able to translate the PBIX file into a readable format, one that makes sense to us. I talked about extract and compile earlier, so let's do that. Let me take the report as it exists here and extract that as a one-off. I already have PBI Tools installed, which means I can just type it like this. I can say extract, and then I just specify the path to the file I want to extract. So fairly intuitive, I hope. If I run this command, it's basically, there we go. So it takes just a few seconds, as you can see. It reads everything that's inside my PBIX file, and then we can see here, I now have a new folder, which happens to have the same name as my file, just without the extension, and that one can be expanded. So now we can see there's actually a whole bunch of stuff going on here. I won't be able to go into every single detail in terms of what every file means, but I'm going to point out the most relevant ones when it comes to report development. First of all, connections.json, that should be fairly intuitive. I said in the beginning that we're using a thin report, one that's live connected, and that's basically what we can see here. This is the GUID, which refers to my data set. So if we remember A431, and I actually go back to my Power BI tenant, we can see here, this is the exact same GUID, right? So this is already very useful because you can see precisely where that connection is actually maintained inside the sources. By the way, the GUID is actually duplicated here. So if you ever think about modifying this automatically, you need to be aware of both places. You also need to be aware that this model ID exists, but that's just a side note. What we're really interested in is our report. There's a subfolder here, which is a standard part of what PBI Tools produces. It just happens to have the same as the parent folder, but this is a pure coincidence. And in here we've got various JSON files. Basically, JSON is the predominant data format in Power BI, and this is how report sources in particular are defined internally. So this is not something I invented. This is literally what we're getting from Microsoft's Power BI. So we've got a few pieces here which are quite obscure, but we can also ignore them for now. One thing we can recognize, there's a theme reference here. We're going to see that later when we make some changes. What's more interesting is actually what's going on in the config file. So for instance, we've got various settings here, a stylable visual container header, new filter pane experience, change filter types, data point lasso select. If you're familiar with the Power BI desktop user interface, you're going to recognize that those are all settings which you can change in the UI, and this is basically how they're represented here. And then down here we've got some properties. So for instance, there's a vertical alignment property which is currently set to top. If I go into my report in Power BI Desktop and look at the canvas settings, I can see over here vertical alignment is set to top, right? So basically, every single setting you are familiar with from within Power BI Desktop is going to be it can be found anywhere in that JSON format. There's another one here, outspace pane expanded, currently set to false. So it's basically I think that's the filter pane saying that this is not expanded, basically collapsed. Now, one thing is really important to understand. This JSON format is not documented anywhere. It's not. In fact, it's not even supposed to be used by anyone. This is completely internal to Power BI, and at this point, no one, Microsoft does not support us doing what I'm currently doing, as in us looking into the internals here and trying to reason about it. So just putting this here as a disclaimer. It doesn't mean that we can't do that, right? But we certainly do it at our own risk. Nonetheless, I'm not happy to accept the limitations that you get from only using with black box PBX files. I need to understand how my changes are reflected, and most importantly, in a team context where you want to do quality control, where you want to be able to test and check implementations, you've got to be able to see what changes were made. Microsoft is definitely into the direction of documenting those artifacts, but realistically, that's going to take quite a while for us. So it doesn't mean that we can't be ahead of the curve and actually look at this already. Just in terms of our initial exploration, those are report level settings. What I can see here when I expand the section subfolder, I basically have a subfolder for each page. So just going back to the report, which is that one, down here we can see page 5 pages, sales by month, time calc, and metric, and those ones, if I go back to the source control view, are represented here. So if I then go further, every single visual that's contained on a page is also held in a subfolder. So my first page, sales by month, has 4 different visuals: a pivot table, 2 slices, and a text box. Let's see if we can find them. Just going back here. So we've got the pivot table. That's the internal name for it. We normally refer to this as a matrix. Then we've got 2 slices, calendar year, time card, and we've got a text box down here. So yes, that's precisely what we were expecting. So hopefully you get an idea of roughly what the folder structure looks like. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to commit this version of the report. That's basically my baseline. That's my starting point. This is where the report is at this point. I need to commit that to my repository so that I'm able to track any subsequent changes against it. Before I do that, and this is one of my tips for you to take away, I'm going to create an additional file in here, not in that folder, in here, which is called .git ignore. There we go. And git ignore is a standard file format, a part of Git source control, which is used to define, well, anything that should be ignored from source control. So what we want to ignore is we want to ignore that PBIX file because what we are actually storing are the sources representing the file. We don't want to store that file itself. That would be redundant and it would also be wasteful. So I can achieve that very easily. Just put star PBIX in here. And then there are types of files. So this is something you have to sort of take my word for it. There are 2 types of files which are held in here. So this is basically those are the artifacts I'm getting for a single visual. We can see there are 5 different files: config, data transforms, filters, query, and visual container. And 2 of those happen to be optional. So query and data transforms, those are files which sometimes get extracted for certain visuals. However, they are completely irrelevant when it comes to recompiling the file. Those are basically just cached files. They contain redundant information. And what I generally do, and what I would definitely recommend one does as a general practice, is to never commit any of those files. And again, this is something which is not documented anywhere. It's just something we've basically learned and found out over the years. So I'm sharing that with you, .json. Here we go. Awesome. You've also, if you pay close attention, you will just have noticed that the colors changed here. So this is the magic of Git coming in. So as I was saving my git ignore file, it immediately picked up that those 2 files, query.json and data transforms.json, are irrelevant now. So they show up as gray. And basically will just be completely ignored moving forward. The same applies to the PBIX file down here. You can see this is showing up in gray as well. All green files show up green because they are new. They've never been committed. That's what green means. and I've got 90 of those left. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to commit all of those and basically call this the initial report version. Here we go. Yes. Right. That also includes the git ignore file. It's quite important that one is also committed because it means that everyone else who checks out that branch later has the exact same settings and doesn't end up then committing files which should actually be ignored. So if we now go back here, you can see the colors have changed. Everything went back to the default gray because we don't have any pending changes. So this is where things get very useful. Now, my next tip, well, actually, it's more than a tip. My next part of the workflow is I'm currently on the main branch. By convention, the main branch represents production. By convention, the main branch represents what is absolutely fixed and protected. Because I'm going to make further changes to my report now, I'm going to go in here and create a new branch. So that's really, really important whenever you work with source control and in a Git context. Before making any changes, always create a new branch, give that a reasonable name, and make sure that the main branch or production or whatever you happen to call it does not get impacted. So I'm going to say create new branch. I'm just going to prefix the branch name with my initials, and I'm just going to call it demo. So we can see down here that Visual Studio Code has picked up the new branch, and now I'm safe. I can now go and make all sorts of changes here without impacting main, and I can even go as far as throwing that branch away if I feel that I made some mistakes there. So that is basically the initial setup, creating a git ignore, switching branch. The next thing we want to do is to actually start making some changes. And I talked about, and we also used Pbi Tools extract earlier, which was a one-off explicit command I had to run in a mode where you work extensively on a particular report and you make loads and loads of changes. It would not be very convenient having to run that command manually all the time. So Pbi Tools actually has a very convenient automation for that, which is Pbi Tools watch mode, and it will automatically extract changes for you. So super convenient, and let's do that. In order to use watch mode, what currently have to do, and I appreciate that's a bit awkward, and there's an improvement for that coming in the upcoming release of Pbi Tools. But what you currently have to do, you have to run you have to run Pbi Tools info, which, as you can see, outputs a lot of information. What we're interested in, oops, sorry, got that wrong. What we're interested in is Pbi sessions. This one down here. You can see there's a path showing for the file that's currently open, and what I want to work with now is the process ID 14168. So I remember 14168. I go back to VS Code and I run Pbi Tools extract, Pbi Tools extract, But instead of specifying a file path, I'm now specifying the process ID 14. I knew I was going to forget it. 168? Yes, 14168. Sorry, 14168. So instead of specifying the PBIX file location, I'm specifying the process ID, and I'm then also saying -watch, which basically also extracts sources, but only when changes are detected. So here we go. This entering watch mode, and changes are detected every time you click the save button within Power BI desktop. So if I go there, here we go, and make this a little smaller so we can actually see what's happening down here. And I haven't done anything now, but still, if I click the save button, pay attention here. PBI Tools is now actually working, and it's extracting the changes like it did before. The only difference is that instead of exiting, it's going back to watching for changes. And the other thing we can see in here, we haven't had any changes because I didn't change anything. There's only one metadata change here, which is my last modified, but that is generated by PBI Tools. That's got nothing to do with the report itself. So if I end up changing something, even as trivial as just sort of changing the dimensions of my matrix very slightly, and click save again, we can see down here, this is kicking off again. And if I then focus here, now we actually have some actual report changes. And this is where the magic happens. So remember, what did I do? I went to the matrix and I changed the dimensions slightly. Let's see if we can track that here. So height was 458 previously, it's now 464. Width was 716, it's now 688, right? So I basically made it slightly narrower and apparently also slightly higher. So we can see that very nicely. That change actually is also duplicated. So this is just sort of an interesting aspect of the internal format, but we can see the exact same figures are replicated here. So let's so hopefully things begin to make sense now in terms of the general workflow and in terms of us being able to actually track changes in a very granular way. The next tip, and very important tip I've got for you, is you want to commit changes you're making very frequently. You want to be you really want to aim to make individual small changes in a report, and then immediately go to the diff view here and commit everything that's related to that one single change, instead of actually spending an hour or two working on a report, doing all sorts of things, and then only committing your changes at the end of that. That's a pattern which also took us a while to sort of learn about and get better at. Initially, when we were getting some noises now, right? Initially, when we were working with Git workflows, we oftentimes actually ended up not following that as a best practice, and we then had commits which contained hundreds or sometimes even thousands of files, at which point you can no longer make any sense of that, and just go and sort of blindly commit things without really knowing what's happened here. So, which is why I now stress very heavily all the time that you should commit small changes and very frequently. So I'm basically saying, what did I do? Changed size of matrix. Here we go. This one here also important to keep in mind, and I've already had requests to actually change that behavior because every time Pbi Tools extract runs, that last modified timestamp is going to be updated. You would basically get a lot of changes in that file, particularly if you follow what I just said by committing often and frequently. You would end up getting this file as a change every single time. So for what I do for now is to basically ignore that when it comes to making commits. The next version of Pbi Tools will almost certainly have a feature that allows you to disable that particular behavior. I've already had some feedback around that. Okay, so let's take a look at what certain types of changes look like. So if I go back to my report, so we've seen a very small and trivial change. Let's look at what we're getting if an entirely new visual is added. So do I have? I don't. Oh yes, I've got sales in here. Good. So let's just do something very simple. I'm just going to put a card visual in here, and I'm going to put total sales amount, like so. I hope Power BI didn't lose. Oh, there we go. It's at the mercy of the demo gods here. Cool. So total sales amount 9.3 million right now. This is an entirely new visual added instead of a existing visual modified. So let's do the same thing here. Let's click save, wait for Pbi Tools to kick off, and then look at what we're getting here. There we go. So remember the colors we were looking at earlier. It's probably easier to see here. So initially we had a whole bunch of new files. They were all showing up as green. They then turned back to white or gray when they ended up being committed, hence didn't have any pending changes. We can see the change I've just made gives us some green files, and that's super important to keep in mind. Certain types of changes simply add new files. Other types of changes modify existing files. And that was also a very important design principle in terms of this Pbi Tools folder structure. We want to be able to see we want to be able to track changes without having a high likelihood of us getting conflicts when multiple people do different changes in parallel. So this one is pretty straightforward. I added one card. I'm getting those 5 files representing the card, 2 of which are ignored. So I basically end up having 3 new files representing that entire card visual. Let's have a quick look at what that looks like internally. There's an internal name, which is basically a unique identifier. We've got our layout settings. We then specify that this is a card visual, and then we've got the reference to our model. In this case, it says we're using the sales amount measure in the sales table. We can also see that down here. That is a sort of SQL-like syntax, which basically specifies which model items we're addressing. So this is S for sales table, and then here this is sales amount as a measure reference. And that's it. There isn't really much else here. We don't have any filters defined, which is why we're just getting an empty file here. And a visual container, we saw that earlier, that's basically duplicating the visual dimensions. So I'm doing the same thing now. I'm gonna add everything, but ignore the last modified. So I've only got the files here, and then I'm gonna call this added sales amount card. Brilliant. So that's that. If I now go and make a modification to that, there we go. For instance, I want this to say, in fact, I want this to, so what do I want this to do? I want this to say total sales amount. So I'm going to rename the field label like so. There we go. Now it says total sales amount. One change that really should be sort of the type of unit we're working with here. And now click save. This is going to kick off. I can go here, and then this time we're only getting one change. And you can see how things start to make sense now, and how it's actually more and more obvious how the changes in the UI are reflected in code. So I'm now getting a display name setting corresponding to my sales amount measure. Going in here. So the other thing I also wanted to point out is our color coding, right? So obviously last time around we had green files because they were new. This time we have the file showing up in yellow because it's been modified. The file already existed, however, it had to change. So this color coding is extremely useful. Gray means nothing's changed. Or like light gray means nothing's changed. Dark gray means we're ignoring it. Yellow means it's been modified. And green means it's been added. And so renamed sales amount card label. Here we go. If I then commit that, and go back here, it's no longer showing up as yellow because now it's been committed and it's under source control. So this is visual being added, visual being modified. The exact same thing applies to entire pages. So if I add a new page, you can presumably already guess what's going to happen. We're going to have a bunch of green files because they are newly added to my folder structure. I'm going to add a page in a very trivial way now by just duplicating this one. Here we go. Still going to give it a different name though. Sales by month 2. Let's do that. And we always want to see that stuff is happening in the background. So I'm clicking save now. So what we're now expecting is to get an entirely new subfolder underneath sections. It with all files showing up in green. There we go. The numeric ID here is basically represents the order. So this is being prepended so that in your source control system, you always have the exact same order of pages as you've got in your report. If Pbi Tools didn't do that, you would basically get a random order based on the alphabetic page header, which is not very useful. So there we go. Super simple. Everything which we have here is now being duplicated and shows up as an additional page. The only thing that would have changed internally would be, where's the page ID? Oh, actually, that one will show up here. Nope, sorry, it will show up here. Okay, report config. Nope. There we go. Sorry. So that's what I was looking for. The internal ID, which corresponds to the page, will have changed. And in fact, that should be referenced in the page itself. Why didn't I see it? It's not here. Filter section. Here, there we go. I was going through too fast earlier. So this is actually where the internal unique ID is specified. That one is different from display name. That's different from the name you can actually see in the report. By the way, out of interest, this name is the one which will later show up in the URL in Power BI service. So if I go here and just open any random report, and you look up here, this last section, which refers to the page you're currently on, is precisely what's actually inside that section.json file. In fact, some people have already found out that using Pbi Tools, you can customize this URL by basically overriding the auto-generated name, and you can give that something more meaningful, because clearly the auto-generated IDs are not readable at all. So that's just an FYI. If I now go back to here, I can basically go and commit everything apart from my last modified, and I can say duplicated first page. Okay, and then if I go back here, everything will have reverted back to normal white, and I have no pending changes apart from the last modified timestamp, which I don't worry about. So this is pages. I'm not going to show that now because we don't have that much time left, but if hypothetically you reordered your pages because the page ordinal is actually part of the folder structure, it would mean that that entire folder ended up being renamed. So just be aware of that. But Git is normally very smart and actually finds that this is not a new folder, even though it technically would have a new name. Git would normally find out that this is just rename. And what I wanted to look at, because it's a slightly more advanced topic, is merge conflicts. So hopefully I can use the last 5 minutes to do that. Because there are two elements within the report which are currently prone to merge conflicts, and I just wanted you to be aware of that. So if I create bookmarks, So let's bookmarks. Here we go. Let's collapse all of that. Right. So I'm just gonna create a standard bookmark. In fact, I can just call it bookmark 1. Doesn't really matter. So I've got a bookmark here, which basically captures the current state of this page. I don't worry about any of the options. That's irrelevant. And I'm doing the same thing, saving it so we can see. Here we go. So we can see changes coming through. You can see bookmarks are currently only held in one single place, in one single file. Whenever that's the case, whenever you've got something defined in a single file, you have a risk of merge conflicts, and so that's what I wanted to point out here. So if I go in here and say I added mark 1, there we go, cool, and let's do it that way. So that's confirmed. And so let's say somebody else had worked. Let me just discard this one. So let's say somebody else also worked on the same report. So I'm in my Git client now. So let's say somebody else worked on the same report, but prior to me having added this particular bookmark. So let's say somebody did some work here. There we go. And I've checked this out now. So there we go. Cool. So what I've now done is I've created a new branch, which is sort of gone back one step. So I'm now at a version of the report that doesn't have that bookmark defined. Obviously, the report that's currently open is still the original one. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to close this, and I'm going to have to recreate the BIX file with the changes. Here we go. So by the way, this is also important to understand. I've closed my Power BI desktop session. The Pbi Tools watch mode automatically detected that. So I don't even have to worry about this. This just stops automatically. This report PBX file down here currently does not correspond to the sources. That is the file which has the bookmark in it. And that's not what I want. What I want instead is I want to compile from sources. I'm allowing it to overwrite. So here we go. Cool. So this file was now updated. If I go in there and open that Power BI desktop, hopefully it won't take too long to open. It's always demo killer. I always try to avoid having to reopen Power BI desktop, but in this case, it was necessary. Okay. It's happening. Here we go. Got it. So I'm opening the same file, and we will see that there's no bookmark here, because again, I created this branch from a version that didn't have the bookmark defined. Windows currently hiding. There we go. Please come to the front. Sorry. I've got it here. Okay. It ended up on a different screen. Here. Windows. Right. Okay, sorry about the delay. So if I go to view and bookmarks, again, as I said, we don't have a bookmark in here. So let's assume I'm another developer. I started off with the same version of report, and I've been tasked to actually also create a bookmark, let's say on a different page. So I'm doing that here. I'm going to call that bookmark 2. Here we go. And what I need to do as well is to Pbi Tools info again to get a new process ID 15484. Right. 15484. Right. Cool. So it's in watch mode now. I go in here and save my changes, and we're gonna expect a change in the config.json file at the report level, which has now created bookmark 2. This is just a trivial change in terms of Z order. We can ignore that. So, okay, let's just do this one. I'm saying added 2. Here we go. I'm gonna ignore everything else. There we go. Right. So now I've got a problem, because if I then go back into my Git client and if I try to merge the changes from this branch into that one, it will tell me that there are merge conflicts, because what happened is each developer, by creating a new bookmark, added something to the config.json file in effectively the same location, and that's not something Git is going to be able to resolve for us automatically, right? That's something where we have no choice but to go in and resolve that conflict by hand. You can see here. So this is the version from demo 2. This is the version from demo 1, effectively. I created bookmark 1 here. I created bookmark 2 here. I also have a different active section index, although that would be pretty straightforward to resolve. But so that's basically what I wanted to point out. What we'd have to do now would be to manually go in here and basically ensure that both bookmark definitions exist within that bookmarks array. And the same thing applies to report level managers. So I'm pointing that out because it's likely that people will run into those kinds of issues. However, it's something I'm very much aware of in terms of it being a problem with a workflow. And the next release of PBI Tools will actually extract bookmarks and report level measures differently. It will extract them into individual files. And then they will behave exactly as visuals and pages do, which means an additional bookmark will just create additional files, an additional report level measure will just create additional files, and we don't have to too much about those kinds of conflicts. So that's coming. That's something you can look forward to, hopefully. I want to obviously have an opportunity to go into questions quickly. So let's just do one final reference. If you want to see other demos and presentations I've done, go to this URL, go to PBI Tools/YouTube. That's basically a forwarding link I put in place to a public YouTube playlist where all previous presentations are collected. This one, once we've got the recording, will also be added here. And you can see a tutorial I did with Reed Havens recently around CI/CD setup, various smaller snippets which present individual PBI Tools features, and then some bigger user group presentations, one with Reed, one with the Des Moines user group, one with the Berlin user group, one with the London user group. So I'm going to be adding more and more items here. We can also share that link explicitly later on. But do we have any questions people would be keen to?
Thanks so much, Mathias, for this informative session. We are looking at YouTube and meeting chat for the questions. I do have one though. Do you see any challenges with import mode reports or something, anything at all which has huge data set size, like which is almost hitting the capacity of 1 GB or something? Any challenges dealing with heavy data sets reports?
So PBI Tools only maintains metadata. PBI Tools only puts definitions for reports and definitions for models and data sets into source control. From that point of view, the size of your model doesn't matter at all, because the data itself is going to be imported. It's only metadata, and which is normally pretty slim and pretty straightforward. The only size, the only case where a PBIX repository can be bloated is when you use lots and lots of custom visuals, because custom visuals happen to be quite chunky, and they may contain a lot of internal resources. I've seen that. Everything else is actually pretty lightweight and straightforward.
All right, that pretty much answers the question. Thank you so much, Mathias, for clarifying that.
Yep.
And
thanks a lot, Mathias. And I was just checking the question from YouTube Live. I just received one of the question, which is in terms of business term question, like what would be the ideal scenario where we should implement this pipeline? Like, is it for a small term organization, mid-size organization, or large size organization, where this approach will be best suitable? That is the question.
Okay. So as I said in the beginning, the origin and the main the reason for creating PBI Tools was to basically enable good workflows in a team context. So in a way, this is targeting larger organizations. I don't know where to draw the line between mid-sized or large, but it's probably overkill if you're just on your own, right? Unless you're just keen and interested to see what's happening inside your file. Even though technically, I mean, the change tracking you're getting arguably is also relevant if you're a standalone developer, but it becomes really powerful and necessary when you want to collaborate, right? So what I've shown today is basically just the how do I get my changes into my repository and how do I track my changes. What we haven't looked at all is the next step, which would be to actually have an automated deployment pipeline to work off that repository. I haven't done that. Well, first of all, to keep focus, but secondly, because I've done multiple talks before actually talking about those deployment pipelines. So which is why I've just shared the YouTube playlist. Various of the sections, particularly the 3-part tutorial. I'm still sharing screen, right? Particularly the 3-part tutorial with Reed Havens actually looks exactly at that. What if you already have your reports under source control? How do you then take the next step and automate deployments? So check that one out because that's really part of the picture as well. And hopefully then you see how things actually work together very nicely. We've got source control with change tracking. We have a way of collaborating because we've minimized the risk of merge conflicts, particularly with the next release, where we're handling bookmarks as well. And with all of that in place, we can allow to set up automated deployment pipelines because we've got the sources in GitHub or Azure DevOps, and they can actually be recompiled automatically and then pushed over to the service.
Okay, sounds good. So I think we are pretty good. If anyone from audience still have any question, feel free to jump in. You can unmute yourself and ask the question. And Mathias, I would like to thank you so much for explaining all of this thing into Power BI Delhi user group and Power BI Philippines community. For the audience who are connected us from YouTube and Teams, let me just share a couple of analytics. Like currently I can see 90 plus views from YouTube and more than 10 people joined from Teams as well. So thanks everyone for joining us, and we will soon upload the recording today, end of the day. So we will share this from our official Power BI Delhi user group as well as Philippines page, and share the link over here. And we will share the link of Mathias YouTube channel as well as all the links that he has shown during his demo. So just check the description box for those information. And yeah, with this we are pretty good. I think with respect to question we are good, and we will also post Mathias LinkedIn URL into chat window as well as in the description box. So if you have any question related to that, you can reach him out on LinkedIn as well even after this session. So as he's mostly available on LinkedIn and other social media handles. So I think we are pretty good to wrap up. Mathias, anything else you wanted to share with the audience with this platform?
Well, definitely big thanks for having me and providing the opportunity. I really appreciate it. I just put the YouTube link into the team channel, but I appreciate most people are actually on YouTube currently. Again, as I said in the beginning, I've got an amazing team in place here. I'm having a good time spending some time face to face with them right now. If anything you've just seen and heard was interesting and you'd like to work in a context, that uses those kinds of workflows, do reach out and we can have a conversation. Other than that, I hope everyone has a nice Sunday.
Thank you so much, Matthias. And definitely, we would like to have you in our upcoming sessions as well, not only for this event. So, mostly we are organizing the big events quarterly and during 6 months. So, we'll definitely keep in touch with you. And once again, thank you so much for your all of your time and the effort for making this entire session smoothly. People get to know many good things from today's session. So, thank you so much, and we'll see you soon into our upcoming events.
Brilliant. Looking forward to it. Bye.
All right. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone. Happy Sunday to everyone. Bye bye.
Thank you so much, Mathias.